hate wrong side cable rows. I think they look like they're a pain in the butt to work because it's not intuitive where they're happening because you're looking at the wrong side. They never look as nice and they're much slower. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the Hilo Stitch podcast. I'm your host Kirsten and I'm here to talk to you about what else? Knitting. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about not one, but two test knits I have somehow gotten involved in. Get a peek at some new yarn, as well as a design idea that is slowly coming into existence. So if you don't know me already, my name is Kirsten Janik. I'm a semi-retired knitting pattern designer, knitting instructor, and all-around knitting enthusiast. When I am not knitting, you can find me doing yoga, watching Orioles baseball, drinking wine, sometimes sewing, but it's mostly about the knitting, so let's go ahead and start talking about it. So I'm not really sure how this happened, but somehow I signed up for 2 sweater test knits at the same time. I thought that was a good idea. So without further ado, let's take a look at them. The first one is almost done. It just really needs to, well, I blocked the pieces and now I need to reblock it with the sleeves. So this, which doesn't look like much that way, is the Willow Cardigan, which I believe I talked about last time. This is a pattern by Kirsten Joel, or maybe it's Kirsten, I really don't know. A lot of questions involved. And this is going to be published, I believe, when you're watching this, it'll be next week. So when I seamed it up, I did block the fronts and backs so you can see they look really nice. But this the sleeve has not been blocked yet, so you can see it's still kind of scrunchy and definitely needs some work. So I knit this in, actually both of my test knits are in Durham Natura yarn. So this one is Cyrano, which is their, I think it says heavy worsted, but I would definitely put it more toward the bulky end of the spectrum yarn. And all of their yarns, I think, are this local special French merino or something. And they're all constructed the same way. I do this every time. It's like written in French, and I, haven't taken or studied French since college, and I understand a few things. Okay, so all of their yarns are made from Merinos d'Arles, which I assume is merino sheep from a particular part of France. It says they're raised respectfully in Provence. Then it says something about black merino sheep from Portugal. Anyway, they're all this fancy schmancy French merino from very specific sheep. The yarn itself is constructed in such a way that it has a lot of air in it, but I don't know that it's necessarily woolen spun. It's some kind of combination of woolen worsted spun, so it's very lofty. All of their yarns are very lofty, but they're still very sturdy and have some nice stitch definition as well. So this colorway is called Quartz, and if you look at it kind of close up, hopefully that's focusing, you can see it has almost like an undertone of gray. So it's a warm kind of pink with a little bit of a gray cast to it, which I really love. And this, as you can also see, blocks out really nicely. So this has an all over, relatively straightforward eyelet pattern that just opens up really nicely when you block it. So as I said, I did block the fronts and backs before seaming. You seam at the shoulders. Could probably leave your shoulder stitches live and use a 3-needle bind off instead. The seam does give it some structure, but I think that a 3-needle bind off would also give it some nice structure. I wouldn't do a Kitchener stitch because you do want that seam there to help hold the weight. It's a drop shoulder, but I think a 3-needle bind off would work as well. Now the instructions for the pattern are then to knit the sleeves and sew them in. I didn't do that. I hate sewing in sleeves. Even this, which is the drop shoulder, and it's, you know, it's not like a set-in sleeve. I just hate doing it. So I just picked up my sleeves and knit them in the opposite direction. And that was easy peasy. So the only downside is that now I've got to reblock the whole thing with the sleeves. I guess I don't have to. I guess I could kind of just get sort of like the sleeve shoulder area wet and pin that out rather than the whole body. I guess we'll see what happens when I try to do it. So as I said, this is going to be published next week. If you are looking for something that knits up really quickly, this is really fast. The stitch pattern is really easy to memorize. I believe the sample is Brooklyn Tweed Quarry, which is also a nice light lofty yarn. So even though it's like a heavier weight, it's still a relatively, you know, it's chunky, but it's not too chunky. It's not like a super heavy sweater, and especially with the eyelets. And then all the trim is garter stitch, and that's, you know, quite easy to work as well. So this is, I'm really hoping, is going to be a really nice sweater to just throw on for spring on those days where, you know, it's chilly in the morning and chilly in the evening, or you know, you need a light layer but not a whole jacket or a whole heavy sweater. So that's test knit number 1, and it is almost done. Be sure to tune into my Instagram feed because I'll be sharing finished photos when it is done. And that actually might be, let's see, this episode is going to air on Saturday, I don't know, what's today, the 8th, the 10th? I guess Saturday the 10th, or is it the 11th? Whatever that Saturday is of February, and by then this will be blocked and I will hopefully have photos of it. Test knit number 2. This is a test knit for Alicia Plummer, and I am again using Durham Natura yarns. This is Elise, which is the sport weight base. Again, same construction, same wool. It's light and airy, but still has some nice structure. And this is a bottom up kind of dolman sleeve pullover. And I actually had made more progress on this. But then I was looking ahead because this is knit in the round up to the sleeves, and then the sleeves, well, it's knit in the round up to, it kind of expands up to around the bust, and then you work flat and you're working kind of like the front of the sleeve, because the sleeves are knit sideways, like the front of the sleeve and the top of the yoke together, flat, and then the back the same. So I was looking ahead and saw that once that was done, or started, there were a lot of wrong side cable rows. Now the test knit description did say there would be a small portion. This is really like half a sweater. Like if it's, you know, this tall and this much is worked flat in the front and the back, that's quite a lot. And I asked, you know, it said a small portion, this is not a small portion, is this correct? And she said yes, but I hate wrong side cable rows. I think they look like they're a pain in the butt to work because it's not intuitive where they're happening, because you're looking at the wrong side. They never look as nice and they're much slower. So rather than do that, I went back, I ripped out what I had done, and I went back to the very beginning of the cabling and added an extra plain non-cable row to the columns where those wrong side cables are going to be, which pushes all of the cable crosses onto the same row and means no wrong side rows, except when you get to the short rows, which is fine. And that's what I thought originally when I applied for this test. When it said a small portion, I assumed that would be in the short rows because you've got to, you know, you've got to go back and forth. I don't know if this is going to come back to bite me in the ass. Looking at the pattern, I don't see how it would. I don't know. I will let you guys know. But that is my plan, because I am not interested in knitting half a sweater with a bunch of wrong side gable rows. They just, they don't make me happy. And rather than give up entirely, because it really is it's a beautiful sweater, the finished sweater, and I love the yarn, and I really love the way it's working up so far. So let's see if we can zoom in a little bit here. I love these cables. So rather than give up entirely, I thought I would make the executive decision to change that. Again, I have no idea. Maybe once I get there, I'll realize that that was the wrong thing to do, and I'll have made some other part of the pattern that much harder for myself. But we shall see. Like I said, I did look through the pattern and I couldn't see any reason not to. I don't think having the cable crosses all on the same rows are going to significantly impact the gauge, because the gauge is already based on these very wide front paddles that are almost entirely cabled. It's a honeycomb cable. So that is really the biggest thing affecting your gauge, and adding, 2 more cable crosses on either side is not going to have a significant impact. So we'll see. Like I said, maybe I'm wrong. I hope I'm not, because I really like this sweater, but I just couldn't see any reason to have all these wrong side cable rows when they weren't really necessary. Maybe it's just me. We'll see. Anyway, so I haven't made as much progress on this because I'm really trying. This is due in the middle of March. And so I've been really focusing on the other test knit, because that needs to be done first. But once that is finally finished, this will be my major focus. So 2 test knits that I'm working on. Other than that, I don't have anything off the needles, and I haven't made a ton of progress on anything else. Here's my Felix Pullover. I'm still working on sleeve number 1, which is fine. It's just that as I said before, I think I'm going to run out of yarn, because I just have this 1 ball left for both sleeves. But it's actually, the sleeve's probably, it does have a long armhole depth, so the sleeve itself doesn't need to be as long, and it's probably like half as long as it needs to be, and it's not running out as fast as I thought it would, so maybe I'm okay. And I would like to have this done to wear before the weather starts warming up, so I don't know. I keep hoping that the yarn is gonna like magically multiply or something in the bag and I won't run out. That's ridiculous. But it's there, and I put a few rounds on the sleeve here and there when the mood strikes. And then the other thing I have been working on, I cast on my first project for my Make 9. And actually I have had this on hold for a little bit, as you can see, because I've got it on the barber cords. So I put it on my model to check it out and see how it was looking. So this is the Heirloom Jumper by Fable Knitwear, and I think it is looking beautiful. I am loving it. As I said the last time, there aren't really any wrong side rows. I mean, it's in the round, but there aren't any like plain rows in this lace pattern. But after I've done it a number of times, even though there aren't any plain rows, it is still relatively easy to memorize. There's 1 column of stitches that alternate between a knit and a purl, and then there's another set of stitches that are always knit, except for like every 4th row they're purled, and it's very obvious where that has to happen. So it is not as difficult as I thought it was going to be, and I've got it pretty much memorized now. Well, I did, but I've had this off the needle for a couple of weeks, so maybe I've forgotten again. So what I'm doing right now, the shoulder shaping is done, and I know this yarn is dark, so it's maybe a little hard to see, but I think that looks just so neat and tidy. So the shoulder shaping is done, and now we're working on the sleeve increases, and this has a, it has two options, sort of a subtle puff and a poofy puff shoulder. So I'm doing the poofier one. It's a lot of increases in a small area, so it's a little uncomfortable to knit, but I think obviously once that's done and shaped, it'll be much more comfortable. So again, I'm loving my yarn. It is this fingering weight base from Fiber for the People. I don't remember which one. This is her Sapphire colorway, and held double with this silk mohair from Knitting for Olive. And this is called Deep Petroleum Blue. They are just beautiful together, and I am thrilled with this. As far as silk mohairs go, I really like the Knitting for Olive. It is less prickly than some other mohairs I have tried, and it's also really reasonably priced. So check that out if you have not. So it's, I guess it's a 50-gram ball. No, it's a 25-gram ball, and it was $12 at Fiber Space in Alexandria, so it should be similarly priced elsewhere. So not a ton of progress there. This is, you know, it's a fingering weight sweater, and it's got a lot going on, so I'm not expecting to zoom through that, but I have been very happy with it. I like how it is turning out, and hopefully, again, after I get some of these test knits that I somehow signed up for, and I've got another one coming up too. I don't know what I was thinking. Hopefully once I make some progress on them, I can get back to some of my more personal knitting challenges. All right, I have just a little bit of yarn to show you in this episode. I got a sudden flash. Hang on, I gotta get the picture. Okay, so I am mostly retired from knitting pattern design. If you want to know why, you can check out, is it over here or over here? I think it's over here. This video, but I had a sudden flash the other day of a sweater that I just wanted to make. So it just sort of, I don't know. I mean, it's nothing special. It's like a fisherman's rib with a, you know, a wide V-neck, kind of oversized A-line shape, wide sleeves. Nothing kind of groundbreaking, just an idea for, I don't know, I suddenly had to make this sweater. And I mean, this would be definitely something for fall or winter, and it's February, and it's certainly not gonna be done this winter. So it's pretty far off, but for some reason I immediately had to order yarn for it. I don't know. So I did, and it's a big sweater knit in like a chunky stitch, a fisherman's rib, or maybe even a half brioche, but either way, they're basically the same thing. And it's a very chunky stitch, so I didn't actually want the yarn to be too heavy, but I did want it to be like a sturdy kind of rustic yarn to give it kind of that like chunky sweater feel without being quite so heavy. So what I came up with is this. This is Mota from Wooldreamers. Wooldreamers is a, I want to say Spanish yarn company. Yes, criado y elaborado en España. So Spanish yarn company working with local farmers, local yarns, local sheep to produce a variety of yarns. So you probably remember this has been kind of a big thing lately, these plates, I don't know, what you call this, of yarn, which are also from Wooldreamers. This is a manchalope, and grown and produced in Castilla-La Mancha, Spain. Okay, so manchalopes are 100% manchego wool. This is also from Wooldreamers. This is an unspun yarn, kind of like the Nutiden and the, what's the other one? The other Icelandic one that's unspun that everybody loves. Platolopi. So it's kind of like that. So these have been popular for probably about a year now. And it's the same company. Just put that back there. But this is obviously something very different. So this is an actual spun yarn, Mota. And this is, what's this? Sport weight? I think it's a sport weight, or I think it's a sport weight. It is 250 yards for 100 grams. So yeah, that's about a sport weight. And it is a 3-ply. It's definitely that sort of rustic, slightly fuzzy. You know, this is not like a soft superwash merino, anything like that. This is definitely a more rustic yarn. But again, it is plied and spun. It's not an unspun yarn, but it is, you can see it's got a lot of air in it. It's very lofty. It's a little fuzzy. It has sort of again, a little bit of a gray undertone. It's a little bit like the Durham Natura yarns. And I love it. And so this is what I was like, all right, here's what I'm gonna do for this sweater that I have no immediate plans. I mean, like, I really want to cast it on right away, but it's ridiculous. It's February. I got other stuff to do. But I had to buy the yarn right away, and so I did, and I now have a bunch of balls of this in my stash. I ordered this directly from the Wooldreamers US, what's it called? I don't want to say office, but you know, like their local distributor. There we go. Directly from the Wooldreamers distributor in the US. They do sell this at a couple of yarn stores, even at Fiberspace in Alexandria, which is my kind of local-ish yarn shop, but they didn't have enough balls in the color that I wanted. And there were a couple of colors that I liked. And it doesn't say it on here because it just has color numbers, but they had a bunch of colors that were, it was like, you know, 953. And then they would have another one that said 953G. And then all the ones that had a G were darker. I did not actually look this up, but my assumption is that G is for gris and that these yarns are the same color dyed on a gray wool rather than a white wool or a cream colored wool. That's my assumption. I could probably look it up. Maybe I will. So, and you can, like I said, you can see kind of the gray undertone in here, and that's why that is my assumption. So they had so many beautiful colors, but all of the G, what I assume are the ones dyed on the gray base, were really stand out to me. And this is the one I landed on, that they had enough in stock that I could get. And then while I was buying this, I also bought a ball of yarn for JJ. He asked for yarn for Christmas. We haven't done a lot with it, but he was trying to help me pick a color, and he really likes like neons and brights, which are the opposite of what I like. But they had like a really bright green chartreuse that he liked. So I bought a ball for him, and maybe that'll inspire him to do a little bit more with his knitting. So I got a bunch of balls of this in my stash. It is for a future sweater design project, a big, cozy, chunky pullover that maybe will see the light of day in the fall. So in the meantime, while I'm waiting for an appropriate season to cast on a big, chunky kind of sweater design, I have been working on putting together this light, airy, springy sweater that I have been talking about for a while. So I finally sat down to swatch to decide what I wanted these quote unquote baubles to look like. So the idea for the sweater, come on, there we go, is for it to have all over baubles, but I don't actually want baubles. They're too big, they're too chunky, I don't want that. So what these are is actually noopes, and they're a little bit smaller, and especially because I am working with a lace weight and a lace weight held together, They're relatively small, and they lie closer to the fabric, and so they don't stick out as much, but you can still see them there. You can still see, you know, that there's something going on here, but it's not like in your face bobbles. Bobbles everywhere. Snoops everywhere. So I finally sat down and decided, you know, what the technique would be for doing the noops, whether they were going to be 5 or 7 stitch, how far apart they were going to be, you know, the rows are going to be, and the actual needle size that I wanted to knit this on. So this was knit on a US 4 needle, and I think that is really giving it, you know, like I said, the noops are there, but they're not too stand out. The fabric is light and airy. It does have some drape, but it's not too loose. Like it's not see-through. So I am really happy with this. And now I'm going to be ready to get started and start doing some math. So again, the yarn I'm using for this is, I've got a lace weight and a lace weight. So this is the Luna base from Sonder Yarn Company. This is a 100% BFL wool. So it is, just gives it a little, I think the BFL gives it a little bit more structure than a merino. You know, because I'm knitting a lace weight on US 4, which is giving it some drape, but I don't want it to be too drapey. I want it to have structure because it's for a sweater. So I think that BFL is giving a little bit more structure to it, and I like that. The colorway is called Terroir, and then the other yarn is Little Fox Yarns, Little Mo. This is a silk mohair, of course, and the colorway is Come On to My House. So swatch is finally done. Decisions have been made. I have to start doing the math, which is, let's face it, my least favorite part. But it's underway, and I'm hoping April, May for this. So again, it is light, it is airy, but it is still wool. So it's not something maybe you're going to be wanting to wear in July, but I think a late spring where you still got a chill in the air is going to be good for this, assuming I actually get moving on the math and the pattern writing and all of that. Speaking of which, if this or the big chunky sweater or anything else that I talk about designing seems like something you might be interested in test knitting, make sure you're signed up for my newsletter. There's a link in the description box below, and they're going to get first notice about opportunities for test knitting. So that is the only design thing I am working on right now. I have some other ideas brewing for like a kind of a square-ish long rectangle wrap, which, let's face it, is really a scarf, but I've got a kind of an idea for that. I've got the big chunky sweater. I'm putting together some kind of just off-the-cuff socks for my sister that may ultimately turn into a pattern, but for now, that is the major thing that I am working on in terms of knitting pattern design. I think I'll put a few more rounds on my Felix sleeve while we have a little chatterbox. It is February. That means my least favorite month of the year is over. I know that this is a point of contention. Some people say that February is the worst month, but I still say it's January. Because February is short. And it has Valentine's Day. And even if you don't like Valentine's Day, I'm sure you like Half-Price Chocolate Day on February 15th. So my least favorite month is over. We are into February. JJ's birthday is February 2nd. He turned 10. I cannot believe this. I am in complete denial. I had to buy him some new pants because he is getting too tall for the kids' size 12 pants. And he's not short, he's not tall, he's not super tall. His dad is very tall, but I'm not. So he's not like ridiculously tall for his age or anything, but already the size 12 pants are starting to get too short. Don't like it. Not a fan. We had a birthday party. We had a birthday party for him last weekend. It was an Among Us theme, if you are familiar with that game. He loves it. I really don't know anything about it, but I found some stuff online about putting together an Among Us live action game that he could play with his friends at his party. So I did that. It took me most of the morning to set up around the house, but the kids really seem to enjoy it. And I think it would have been probably more fun with more kids. There were only, I guess, 5. I asked, he doesn't have, he has cousins, but they live far away in Chile and Utah. And I asked if he wanted to invite some school friends, but he said no. And actually I gave him, beforehand, because we always just have a party at home with some family and friends. But I asked if, he'd rather do like a party at like one of those trampoline parks or something like that. And he said no. But then he also didn't want to invite any school friends. So there weren't too many kids here. But they still had fun. And we had a nice time. And now he's 10 years old. And this morning, for some reason, he thought a good way to start the day would be to say, Mom, it's only 8 years until I'm a grown-up. Unacceptable. So with that done, I think my season of madly planning things is winding down. So we had Thanksgiving, we had Christmas, then my sister turned 40, and then JJ's birthday, and now finally, I think I can rest a little bit, sort of, except that we're going to Peru. The organization that my husband works for offers him home leave every 2 years. We have not gone since 2018, because of the pandemic. And so with the, I don't want to say pandemic over, but mostly being managed for the most part, we decided we would like to try to do it this year. And so home leave, his organization pays for our flights and then gives us a per diem to visit his home country. So we will be spending the first 2 weeks of April in Peru. My dad and my sister are going with us I think my dad's going the whole time, and my sister is going for like 10 days, I think. His mom lives in Chile now, but she has an apartment in Peru, and so she'll be in Peru while we're there. I am hopeful that I'm going to be able to take my dad and sister to Cusco, which is really my favorite place to be in Peru. But there's a lot of political turmoil and protests and things going on now in Peru. If you're not aware of that, definitely something to look up. You can find out more about. I don't know what the situation is going to be like in April. So we're just kind of going to have to wait and see. My dad and I went to Cusco the last time in 2018, but my sister had a whole thing with her dogs, and so she ended up not coming to Peru. So she has not been to Machu Picchu or Cusco or Lima or anywhere. So this would be my 3rd visit to Machu Picchu if we do go. And if she were not coming, I probably would not do Machu Picchu again. I'd really actually like to go to another part of Peru called Arequipa. But like I said, she hasn't done any of the Peru stuff yet, and I do absolutely love Cusco. It's my favorite place to visit. Machu Picchu itself, of course, is wonderful, but I wouldn't necessarily say you need to go there 3 times. But Cusco, I certainly won't be sad about going to Cusco. Although I would hopefully at some point like to venture outside of the Lima, Cusco areas and try seeing some other places in Peru. So I don't really have to plan that. You know, my husband arranges the travel with his office, and he's already booked us an Airbnb, and it's, you know, his country. So he is the one that needs to be like figuring things out. But if we do go to Cusco, my husband is going to stay with the kids in Lima. Really don't, you know, they're not really old enough to appreciate any of the stuff that we would be doing in Cusco. And I also don't know how the altitude will affect them. So I will have to take charge of planning that if we do end up going to Cusco and Machu Picchu. But at least I get a little break. I don't think I have to plan anything in March. There's nothing happening. I hope. Is there anything in March? I don't think so. No birthdays, no major holidays. We will be in Lima for Easter, so I don't have to do anything with that. So yeah, I guess I get a bit of a break, and that will be nice. Really looking forward to that. I'm not looking forward. I am looking forward to going to Peru. I'm looking forward to being in Peru. I'm not looking forward to the getting to Peru part, the travel part, the kids on the plane part, and we were worried because his office is usually, the rule is that you have to take the cheapest, most direct flight. And all of those were red eyes. And I really did not want to be dealing with two kids on a red eye twice in 2 weeks. But they were more flexible than we thought. And we will not have to take red eyes. We will, I mean, it's a lengthy flight. It's a couple hours to whatever the connection point is. I don't remember. It's Miami or Atlanta or what it is. And they were red eyes out of Dulles, which was okay. But now we're gonna fly out of National, I think, or maybe BWI. I think National though, and none of our connections are too tight, so we've got a couple of hours in each place, but they're also not too long. So yeah, it's usually like a couple hours to the connection point, and then it's like 5 or 6 more to Lima. The last time the kids were actually really good on the plane. Their ears didn't bother them. They got to watch TV. They got to play video games. They were excited to be flying. It was their first flight. I don't know how it's going to be this time. Ollie has, both of my kids, well, JJ's definitely on the spectrum. Ollie has DeGeorge syndrome and is most likely on the spectrum as well. We haven't gone through all the testing with him yet. And his thing is he hates screaming kids or babies, which is odd because he is one. So he wears headphones, like the big kind of like monster truck ones. He wears them to school. He wears them if we go to a restaurant. He can certainly wear them on the plane. But God forbid there's like a kid right next to him. That's gonna be rough. So that I am not really looking forward to. But once we get there, I think it will be fun. It will be just turning to fall there, and still will probably be pretty warm. Kids will probably be able to go swimming. And they get to see their grandma, and we rented a really nice Airbnb with space for us to all, kind of spread out. And last time we were in a relatively small apartment, but this time we got a slightly bigger place, and I think we'll have fun. We just have to get there first. And other than that, I think that's about all that's been going on. Thank you so much for joining me for another episode of the Hilo Stitch podcast. Full show notes with links to everything that I've talked about in this episode can be found at mediaperuana.com/Hilo-Stitch. Here on YouTube, if you enjoyed this content, please don't forget to subscribe. Please give the video a thumbs up, leave a comment. In the description box below, you will find a link to a new form that you can fill out if you have a request for a video, something you want me to talk about, a tutorial you want me to share, anything knitting related mostly, and you want to tell me about that, you can find that link down there. Fill out the form and let me know. If you're looking for me on social media, you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as Media Peruana, and I will see you next time.